I'm gonna need y'all help today as I continue to try to build out these skill sets. I need for a couple of folks to come in. Probably my guy Kenny. He's normally good for it, but I need your help trying to send out links so I can at least go through those steps, bring one person on, and once I feel a little bit comfortable with that part of the next phase, I know it will build out some of these conversations in the future to be able to host a commentary or a live stream that does include other folks. Apologize in advance, but if you're gonna nephews with me, be up there or over there that way. I ain't gonna tell them to leave. I'm gonna just do what I need to do. But in the meanwhile, as you know, multiple skill sets here. So one of the things that you don't find out is that like all of those intros and stuff, if you have somebody that does music, then that's where it could probably be a little bit easier. But if you don't have anybody that does music, then you gotta pay for everything. So like intro, if you have like promotionals or marketings that you want to do for other folks as a part of your content in the social media space, all of that stuff costs and it takes a little bit of time to get it all together. So while I'm waiting on my guy Kenny or waiting on somebody who rocks with the B1 network to come on through, I think I have one person, but let me see. What is my chat? Anyway, I go to one page which is called soundclick.com, and that's where you can find a lot of productions and such. So let's do that. Who's over there? Okay. I, and so this one's interesting, the SoundClick, because some of the features that you have it's choice. It's like the biggest thing about it. So you start off at the home page. When it comes to choice and the different types of beat to match or productions to go with your own streams, I typically start here in the instrumentals, but as you see, there's a whole lot of genres that are available to select from. But then even there, they give you choices right with the subgenres. They have beats in general, what they call classical, club bangers, cover songs, crunk. That's still on there. Yeah, that's a thing. Dirty South, but they also have trap, so that's interesting. You can test it out and see what's the difference. They have smooth, Latin, kind of like the Latin for cultural appropriation reasons or whatever it is. Whenever hip hop and Spanish come together, as long as it's a Spanish person pushing it, they can get a heck of an audience. Kind of like that. And you'll hear some of the 808 dropped into some of those Latin beats, for example. And that's one of the ones that I've paid for that I'm starting to use and get familiar with. So pretty good. What else? But they have what they would consider R&B. What I like is blues though, and I don't see much blues here. Jazzy. I'm not really as big on jazzy, so we can see what they have. That'll be a good one. But they also have games and instrumentals and music. So shout out to SoundClick. But then as you come here, just a quick walkthrough. They use like a thumbnail similar to like the YouTube videos, the title of whatever the track is called. Um, if you can buy the song, you'll see that there. Get more information about the production. So like here, paperfallbrothers.com. MP3 lease is $25. The Wave file, 35. Premium lease, 75. Unlimited lease, 150 for exclusive rights and inquiries. Just contact, and then they list there. So that's a heck of a setup that you have there. Cost is important because this is a cost game here. And then, yeah, so like that. I'll scroll through based off of the thumbnail. I kind of see what where their vision is, or it gives me some information about what their vision was. rock with Beats by Classic. They're pretty good. He always puts in like his titles J. Cole or they, excuse me, J. Cole slash Kendrick type beat, something like that, with the live guitar. I think I actually remember this one and I was considering it. One of the things that's most important for me is actually being able to, how simple it is to actually make a purchase if I do like it. So this one's sorry, not available. Looks like somebody has already taken it. It's kind of bluesy. I like that one.
ForClassics.com.
Wait, let me take it off. You can download it. Beats by Classic. See what that does. So not bad. Pretty quick to download. All right, now this is one of the most important sections that I look at. I'm not on the level of tracking them out. I'm not recording them for mixes and masters at this point. And so because I'm not there yet, I like to look at these two categories and see what they have. As a content creator, even sharing it and then sharing it amongst content creators, when it comes to the music file itself, that's going to be important. 25,000 streams, or that they have at least some idea of how many streams they would like. I think they put like tags inside of them so that they can track on their own end, but that is up to them. But if it needs to be extended, oftentimes they'll work with you. Secondly, I like to see buy one, get one free, because, well, if you can put two sound productions in the same content, then I think you can, it changes it up. It changes tempo, changes pace and all of that. So that's good as well. So if you get one, so basic for the $30, not bad. See how long it takes to actually add it through the cart. Go on and check it out. So like sometimes you would have the opportunity just to download it and then you can essentially use it inside of your music. But because I know it's an interconnected business, I like to see the fullness of the industry, which means everybody who plays those roles can benefit. So let's see. Nephew, why is your TV so loud? But it is, because I hear it way over here. Oh, and then what I'm doing, I'm trying to see if this PayPal actually connects. I'm having some complications with it, so we shall see. What are they doing? Man, what are they doing? Oh, that's on my end. What do we got with me? Oh, you know what I said I was going to do? Let's try it this way. Another key thing that we did here, I did set up a second display so I can see sometimes, but bear with me, still getting used to that. Where is it? Not that one. Wow. Look where the kid. Put some in the chat. Who rocking with me right now? I just want to test this link, send out a link. If you're available, I want to drop my email there so that I send you a link. I can add you on. Once I learn that I can do that, I can move forward. So if you would so kindly shoot me an email, if you would be willing to help me through this test, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm considering too, so let me do this. Hey man, I'm chill as fuck, man. I really don't need a whole bunch of folks in. I just still only need that one that'll come through. And there we go. So it wasn't that bad. I just needed to find my password. Sometimes that can be a little bit tedious. Let me see. So instantly, we'll see what happened from the download store. Go in and we buy it. Start the download. I already should have the download on the way. Purchased just now. Yeah, that's the 320. I actually like to put on my desktop until I found out which one. Use that. Open it up. No, it's Sunday morning. Where's everybody at, man? Good morning. Good morning. And little Miss Chocolate, I am doing well. How are you? So I'm just trying to do a live test, but I actually want to send out the link. I put my email there and I want to see if that works, like how that process works. I see a lot of YouTube content creators who are able to bring on people. And I've been on the recipient end of somebody sending me an invite, but I'm not entirely familiar with how I do it myself. So There is my email there in the chat. If you would be willing to receive an invite, let me know. I just want to test it, and after that, I'll be ready to get back to it. But what it is, once I send the link, I think you accept it, and then you'll be added to some part of this screen here where I'm supposed to be able to see you in the background. And then by clicking on either an image or something, I'm not sure what it looks like yet, which is why I'm testing it. It would be able to bring you then into the live stream. So if I can get to that point, I would be more than appreciative. Or no. Oh, just show me an email, and then I'm gonna try to send it through the live stream. Let me see. But I thank you. Appreciate it. So let's see here. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm actually bring this over so you can see it too. So this is like the background area. I'll make it bigger. This is the background area of the Yard stream. Sometimes it brings this up, sometimes I don't see it, but this is supposed to be the YouTube chat. And to be able to actually share the content, that's where I'm at now. So I think it's on comments. Banners. No, I'm not producing a banner. Don't need private chat. Oh, invite. There it is. Copy to clipboard. Let me try that. Let's see what this does. All right, Little Miss Chocolate, try this one. And maybe we won't have to go through the other route, which is the email. I'm more familiar with email. Email comes to my phone. That gives me the access to go on and go straight through it. Oftentimes when I tried to join links through the chat, similar to the one I just posted, it would go somewhere else. And I wasn't feeling that. Audio issues would happen. And so it always just worked better for me to be at my computer and to go through my email. But let's test it out. Appreciate your participation and contributing to this development. Appreciate it. See, this is what happens when men challenge other men. He like, man, y'all need to create content and get your thoughts out there. And so men just jump right into it. I'm like, man, I'll do that shit. Man, I'll join you in the B1 network and start delivering content from a Black first perspective. And so that's the blues. Anyway, so then I was like, damn, now that I said, yeah, I forgot that I don't even know. Like, it's like, wow, there's so many steps that they skip. Like when you see their productions brought together, it's like, wow, you're doing actually a lot. Like I never anticipated all of this. All right, so now that we have that, went wrong. All right, so hold on. I see you now. That's what happens. All right, perfect. So let me do this. Let me put a break on the music real quick. If I can find out where it is. I see you all. Give me 2 seconds. Now, what did I just do? How did I get my music to play so well? The next step will be to figure out. So Bam. So two people join, but they join at the bottom. So if you're not watching this background screen, it's likely to miss them. So from there, I think I would just have to. Oh yeah, there it is. There it is. All right, so we're here. Little Miss Chocolate, I thank you so much. I am going to hit this add to the stream button, if that's quite all right. If not, let me know in the chat. Say no, don't press it, or yes, go ahead and press it. But now we're at the point of where I needed to get to. And I'll give you the backstory now. So I had tried to send out the link before a show, and I had sent it to a big big YouTuber or social media influencer. I'll just tell you the name, Nyla Says. And I sent it to a few folks, but Nyla Says is the one who had actually come to this part. And oh wait, it says private chat, so let me take it off the screen. I think Nyla Says may have been all the way to this point while I was sharing and delivering content and ready to go in, but I did not know to look right here. And so I was not able to add her at that time. And I thank you all for helping me out today, because I do not want to make that mistake again. You might get one while you're learning, but bear with us. So let's see here. She says, I'm cool. Cool like yes, cool like nah, don't add. I appreciate you. The vegan. Thank you for coming. So we're good now. I appreciate everybody that joined real quickly. Using StreamYard 101, how to add other folks to the chat. Two ways to go. You could probably send a link out prior to the show, or you could send a link out during the show to those folks who may be interested in joining the panel. More than that, you can send a direct, or you can copy it to clipboard to invite those folks in, and then you can just drop it inside the chat. That's another way that it can do when you're creating live content. So that was my 101, my eyes open. Took about 23 minutes to get it done, but now that that's done, hopefully it provides some insight to somebody else. While I'm on, a key area of insight that my brother George Macon wanted me to expound upon, I will go into that right now. As you know, I will use these learning lessons, put the learnings and any information like that up front. Now that you have your learning, I'll go into my B1 perspective of a popular topic. Where is my music? There it is. All right, I'm gonna turn the volume down on the music a little bit, and then I'm going to jump into some content from my big bro. Highly interested, highly engaged. And so I'm going to provide some context to what's going on a political space. Now, if you're not into all the politics, there's something that you can learn here about it. It's the interconnectedness of a couple of key issues. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through YouTube and have the conversation just more in general. Won't be needing that one. I'll also be taking notes as I go through it, because it's a lot of information and I want to stay on track. So peace, sis. I just went through it. If you're just joining, Sister Nyla, the last time when you had joined the panel, or when you had come and I had sent the link, I didn't realize what I didn't realize. And so I used this stream to start off with a test. And we had Little Miss Chocolate who joined, and then the vegan, it looks like the vegan athlete, but I digress, that joined and helped me out. So now when I do send the link, I know where to actually look here in the StreamYard to be able to add folks on and then have that conversation. So the link is in the chat, and then I also know how to send it through like Gmail now. And so what you'll hear from business folks all the time is email management, subscriber management, email management, anything like that, email distribution list. And as a critical part of social media is being able to leverage the connections that you make across multiple platforms, and to have it in an organized space. So when you are delivering on key content, key information, let's say you have a critical collaboration coming, a big collaboration where they're going to be sending out their links to the people in their email chain, their Patreons, they're doing the same thing. And so as a courtesy and as a respect to a fellow content creator and somebody in this space who's operating at a high level, has the skill set to send them out
you want to join that. And so you want to send out yours as well to the folks that you have in your email, your Gmail or your Outlook or whichever email you use, maybe even Yahoo. You want to send them out to your Instagram, and you want to even go into some key decision makers and try to bring them on board. So you're going on your LinkedIn and you're putting it out there directly into their DMs and such, saying, hey, join this panel. It's going to be a phenomenal presentation. We have 4 heavy hitters across America or across the social media content space who will be building on a certain topic. So with all of that said and done, that one fundamental piece is the how. How do I send that link out, and what does it look like on the back end? And then being able to work through the audiovisual elements of a production for something like that. So appreciate it. It was my lesson learned. Apologies again for having you there. You actually did take the call and then come on in. So I appreciate it. So right now for Brother George Macon, he wanted me to elaborate on one point, and I got to go through my phone to actually find it. What we will be discussing for a few, I know it's Sunday, so we'll have some content creators get ready to come on in and do their thing. But while I am here and while I have the attention of at least one, this conversation is a much needed conversation, and it is a conversation that will fly under the radar should we choose to omit it. So I got my text. You can't see the text, but I'll just go through it real quick. My buddy George Macon asked me to chime in my opinion on a YouTube video. And I'm going to bring that up for you right now. So it is on youtube.com. Let me get you the full screen. Search. It says Trump administration says all groups do not have. See where that goes. Oh, that didn't even get me all the way there. Well, do not have protection under the Title 7. Is that the one? This is the one. All right, so you got the premise. Again, so this conversation is a much needed one. The LGBTQ and allies community using the Title 7 protections under the Civil Rights Act. A lot of context here. And so I want to be able to have a quick conversation about that. What's going on? Why is it important? And you got to mind, don't mind me. I am bouncing back between my phone, and now I'm using 2 screens now. So definitely got a lot of key learners to get up to speed with some of the folks who make this look seamless. I don't know how y'all do it, but appreciate that. So the first place we want to go to is here. I'll start here. Man, I could have sworn all of these things were already linked. Why is it not giving me my, yeah, sign your dumb ass in. Oh, you know what? I think I cleared my cookies and all of that when I got hit with that, whatever happened. Let's try that. Yeah, so interesting enough, I was doing the MASS, MASS, or multiple active shooter scenarios last weekend. And then all of a sudden, my computer gets hit with some random virus or something. It locked me out, shut my whole computer down, had to do the whole force quit and unplug, and then get the Norton antivirus on my phone and on my computer just randomly, man. But those things happen in this space. But yeah, let's start here. The credibility statement. You don't need to know everything about who I am and what I do, but one of the things that's important is when I have a question I ask. And so it was back in like April, I believe, where I reached out to the chairman of the LGBT caucus at the Democratic National Committee. And I just asked him the question, how soon will the Supreme Court decide on the LGBT cases? He said late this year and earlier next year, probably next year though. And so what was interesting about it is that there is an ongoing battle on the Democratic side, I would say. Not that it precludes or excludes it from being in the Republican side, because we do know that on the like in Virginia and such, they have transgender politicians there who are up there. And so it is on both sides of the spectrum, but it is an actual battle. It is absolutely something that's going all the way to the Supreme Court. And how do they get it there is by finding civil rights and piggybacking off of the civil rights gains of the 60s and even the 1860s, the 1866 particular sections, and using those sections inside of critical spaces like economics or employment, thus Title VII. And so before jumping into Title VII, which is the employment element of it, we wanted to say, well, who are some of the key individuals who are pushing this battle forward? So as you see, that's Earl Folks, Democratic National Committee, or the chairman of the caucus at Democratic National Committee for LGBT. Someone very familiar. I advise if you have a question, reach out to him. He does answer questions, as you see here in LinkedIn. So again, using multiple mediums, your social media, your YouTube, your email, also your LinkedIn. Don't sleep on LinkedIn, because there are some very high power and connected people who can answer these questions for you at any given event. Some a little bit more responsive than others, but it beats picking up the phone book, I'll tell you that. And one of the key things that old civil rights leaders said, or many civil rights leaders of old said, is that if they would have had access to the social media, how much more connected these movements would have been, how much more efficient these movements would have been. And if anybody wants to join on in and have this conversation more than just me having a dialogue about it, I mean, me just having a rant about it, feel free to hit that link. All right. And so that's a little bit of the context. Working with my brother, George Macon, he was like, well, what do you feel about this? And my first thought would be, well, I've been up on it for a while. I attended Morehouse College. Some of the brothers who were there, Atlanta itself has a high population of LGBTQ community. The chocolate Mecca and Washington, and then San Francisco, and also New York, some of the most affluent places and spaces are places that are making their environments a little bit more friendly and more tolerant and open, more progressive. My personal sentiment is that the LGBT community is realizing the power of what the African-American community, or the American descendants of slavery, had realized a long time ago, which is the human element in nonviolent political activism. Now, the LGBT community hasn't always been nonviolent. They've had their episodes of going into full-fledged violent riots as well. But in the grander scheme of things, this politics is the resolve of nonviolence in order to address a grievance against those who would be violent against them, and lock them out of spaces like economics. And so they are hijacking that movement. And then oftentimes it's not even a hijack, because many of them share the same discriminations that others would face. They share the discriminations in the employment spaces. They share the same type of discrimination or racial profiling or gender profiling or sex profiling in many of this in society in general. There is a majority of folks who are just flat out intolerant when it comes to Black bodies, period. They don't care if you're a black elder. They don't care if you're a black economist. They don't care if you're a black teacher, if you're a black middle class, black poverty. They don't care one way or the other about your black body. And thus the protections are not extended to you. And systemically, the reason why it's necessary to even go to the Supreme Court is because the majority that does not care about black bodies and does not care to have black bodies inside of their spaces, or what they would consider their spaces, boardrooms, they use as their leverage the systems, and they can pull on these levers of hiring practices. They can pull on these levers of redistricting. They can pull on these levers of media in order to lock out black bodies from spaces, industries, from even the media, from the banks. The upper echelons of credit in mass are black people are locked out systemically from the upper echelons of the trueness of credit. $1 million credit lines for a single individual, you're locked out. You know, even and in many cases, the attitude or the prevailing attitude, even amongst those who are being discriminated, the majority inside of that minority of those who are being discriminated against is one of self-defeat or give up or quit. Don't do anything about it. And so I use the word hijacking because it's one of the most common, but this is a shared experience that the LGBT community has been able to identify with, whether you like them personally or individually or not. Systems that still discriminate have to come down. All right. For those African Americans who are in that minority group that say, well, no, some of these standards are there to protect the best interests of America. They can say things like that, but tell them to prove it. And the only thing that they can do to prove it is go back into history, back into Jim Crow, back into slavery, and say, see, socialism doesn't work. See, communism doesn't work. The Marxism doesn't work because capitalism is better, and capitalism has successfully killed most of its opponents. Killed their dreams, killed them physically, their bodies, the leaders who were moving in with other ideologies and moving it forward in mass. They didn't just lock them out, they locked them up in mass incarceration as a lever that they can pull. See, and discriminatorily pulling that lever and aiming that those levers or those things that they can pull, politics, economics, force, aiming that discriminatorily at certain folks. All right. And because that continues to happen, you can say hijacked, but if you allowed your movement to be hijacked, then the onus is still on you. I don't really like hijacked as much. I say it because it's the most common. But right now, it's not about a hijacked movement as much as, well, there's spaces for you to work in employment, like in California. I'll show you another one. So we've been on this screen long enough. Let's move forward, build it out. And so they have to ask, what are you doing with your movement? And I'm gonna just go to the wiki because that one's it has the most just words rather than all the pictures and stuff. I don't really go for the pictures. And if they had any external links like to the bill, it's already in one consolidated place. But the Crown, create a respectful and open workplace for Natural Hair Act, is a California law which prohibits discrimination based on hairstyle and hair texture by extending protection for both categories under the FEHA and the California Education Code. It is the first legislation passed at the state level in the United States to prohibit such discrimination. The Crown Act, which was drafted and sponsored by State Senator Holly Mitchell, was passed unanimously in both chambers of the California legislature by June 27th, 2019. It was signed into law on July 3rd, 2019. California became the first state out of 50 states to ban discrimination against natural hair, Why is that important? Because one of the levers that are pulled discriminatorily and systematically is in the hiring process. And if we can't do anything to change the hearts and minds of those who are discriminating against African Americans or discriminating against folks because of things like this, it seems outlandish that it even has to be brought up. But that our sisters who do decide to have their natural hair, our sisters who do decide to wear weave, our sisters who want braids, our brothers who want their natural hair, our brothers that want locks, that don't want to line up their edges like such, don't want to look like, some media pundit, but just look like a natural rough brother with a skill set and a personality that can survive in the workplace. There's discrimination. Now, this is going to add up, so you just got to continue to rock with us. What does this have to do with the LGBTQ community, Brother George? I'm glad you asked, which is why we have to go through it. This is one of the most recent examples of where you are using these civil rights bills. You're using the civil rights bill. Listen real quick. You're using it as a platform for continued human rights, right? You're using that one bill as a platform that connects all others or many other civil rights, whether it's the economic levers that you want to use it on and say, look, discrimination should not exist in XYZ industry because, and then here is one of the examples where they found that even the sisters and the brothers' braids, his cornrows or her cornrows, was a fireable or a non-hireable even offense. So before you don't even get a job, let me try to make it bigger so you can see the screen. If the sound of my voice may not be the best, so I'm gonna try to make the screen a little bit bigger for you. That way, if you are a reader like myself, you also have access to that information. Senate Bill number 188. An act to amend section 212.1 of the Education Code. The government has to continue to amend these codes relating to discrimination because if it's not spelled out in plain black and white language, there's nothing to say. See under section 12926 of the government code, they need to speak like that when they're filing their claims in order to even, it is so hard, right? Because the burden is on the African American right now to prove discrimination. And unless you have like a recording or something like that, a videotape, and don't think that your employer is going to freely give you their videotapes of instances where those people who were in hiring, making decisions or positions of management have said things openly and unashamedly about Black women. So if a Black woman comes in with a perm, I like your hair. But when the Black woman has her hair in a, one of the cute little bun blowout ponytail hairstyles, but it's her natural hair, a little bit rough. And definitely, I'll tell you, they are not keeping records of the people they said no to when they're fired, when they're not giving you a job interview. There may be a record that you applied, but they are not keeping a record of the reasons why people were. And then don't think that you can put the onus on these same people who use discrimination as a weapon, as a lever of employment discrimination in America. Don't think that you can trust them to tell you that, oh yeah, I discriminated against her because I thought she was fat and I didn't see a space where her body size was going to be a good fit here. They're not going to come out and tell you that shit. I didn't like her cornrows. Expect better when we hold them accountable for better. If we can't hold them accountable for honesty and integrity and those things, man, we got a long way to go. We got a lot of work to do. And don't make it just so short-sighted. African Americans can discriminate against African Americans for the same reasons. Like if you turn it on a Black conservative channel, the Black conservatives often seem to be the ones who tout being the employer. And so it's also problematic, and you'll hear the discrimination that they throw out there, like the bamboo knots. I love those. Those are hot. And I think that it is 100% appropriate, just like if an Asian woman wanted to wear fucking her hair in like little rubber band, like with the two rubber band ponytails, like Pippi Longstocking or something. I don't see why that's a reason for her not to get a job or not to get hired. If she just has one solid ponytail, if she wraps it up, whatever the style is, that what the fuck does your hair have to do with anything in the first place? But we can't get there. That's too much to ask. The hair that you can't wear is where we're at right now. And we have brothers who are on the side of, well, they're right. Maybe don't nobody want to see you wearing that little nappy hair and that weave to work and all of that other extra stuff that they like to say, not knowing that if they are an employer, at some point that should be illegal. And they openly express their, I guess, their disdain, and they try to make it about the black women. And they try to make it about the, the Pookie and Ray Ray argument. Classic. Oh, you should know better than wearing your cornrows to a job interview. You're not going to get a role. Wear your cornrows. You'll hear brothers at the water cooler, like they'll look at him and be like, oh, look at his hair. Look, when they started doing the little mini dreads, and it's not always the prettiest sight if you go 4 weeks without getting them bad boys hit back up. So if it starts to look a little rough or your dreads don't look like the very neat ones on TV, you know what I'm saying? But if you get one of those European or Brazilian wavy weaves, now you're back in and you'll get the compliments from them same people. Why? Because they would prefer that you wear your hair like a European, and your own hair can't just be hair. And they can never learn to appreciate you, your skin, your hair, nothing about you, as long as you are the one that's forced to comply. So finally, the legislation again says existing laws states the policy of the state of California to afford all persons in public schools, regardless of their disability, gender identity, gender expression. See, they were one of the first ones to push this progressive thing. This part here, Brother George Macon, is what's going to the Supreme Court. This language, the gender identity, gender expression, those are the ones that the LGBTQ community is trying to push from a supreme. They want it to be a national thing. Stop discriminating based on stupid ass shit. And no, it shouldn't be necessary, but it's absolutely necessary in the world we live in, because these racists and folks, they don't ever have to say, well, I'm racist. They never have to say, here are my biases that I hold against black people. I don't like black people's hair. I don't like black people's weight and their obesity. I don't like, they never held accountable for that. And so by them being the people still making decisions on who gets hired, what does a good fit look like to answer phones and have conversations all day? What does a good fit look like for that role? But they're never held accountable. But what happens is, and I don't want to jump the gun on this, I'll get there a little bit later. I'll give you a teaser. Yvette Carnell talked about it as well. But here we go with this one. This was the hair thing. So regardless of there, and then list out everything else that you want to say: nationality, race, religion, sexual orientation, or any other specified characteristic. Equal rights and opportunities in the educational institutions of the state, and states that the purpose of related existing laws to prohibit acts that are contrary to that policy and to provide remedies therefore. So that's where they'll leave you hanging. They'll say that it's against the law to do it, but what then happens? They don't have any enforcement mechanisms. They don't say that this is prohibited. They don't expressly say that it's prohibited. And again, what they don't do is then go in to say, well, who's responsible in the court of law of proving this? If I tell you that my manager said they did not like my nappy afro, is that grounds to sue the company? Or do they press charges just against that manager? Is that like an on-bud button incident? Is that something that's specific one-on-one between my manager and my manager needs some training? Or is that a civil rights violation that entire company is now liable for? That's what they won't do when it comes to this right here. They leave the teeth off. And what's going to happen is they will make that your job, so that all the incidences like the Me Too movement are now incumbent upon that woman to prove that the misogynist or the locker room talk was directed at her, and specifically because of her sexual orientation. Not for the woman to say, look, these are the roles that I've applied for that I had been passed up on. This is the feedback that I received, or the no feedback that I received. On each of these incidences, these cases were funneled through the same key decision makers. The same key decision maker who at the company outings opens up an open bar in their room. You feel where we're going with this? Because we're still dealing with people. They open up an entire bar in their room where there is questionable comments that can happen, but it's open bar. It's a bigger space. There's men, there's women, there's black, there's white, there's everybody in there. But this same individual has on his team, and in the last 6-7 promotions, only promoted the good old boys each and every time. Now, here in America, that is the legacy of employment discrimination. And so to get to this point was finally the women saying, look, I've had enough. Stop discriminating against stupid shit like my hair. I know at some workspaces they discriminate against things like what you wear, and they have a code of conduct. But often inside of that code of conduct, you will not find an enforcement mechanism that works on the behalf of the people in that company. And you will not find an enforcement mechanism that clearly states anything against the employer. All they will say is, if you have a problem, we have a system for you to escalate your issue or your complaint internally, which will then be resolved internally. Right? That is the majority, and that is not a resolution. All right, so rock with me here. This is just one example of a bill or a proposal that has been moved forward successfully in modern times, but it's not the whole story. It doesn't specifically speak to the LGBTQ, but these are the things that they're looking for that we're building out: gender identity, gender expression, any of those ones, because they're still trying to hold that against them. Antelope Valley Community College in California. Shout out Silks. John McDonald et al. Versus Antelope Valley. Man, that's a big case right there. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pivot here. I wanted to provide a real world modern time example. Remember, I'm responding to my brother George Macon, who asked, what do I think about? I'll play a little bit more of the video, and then I'll go into the next section, which is Title VII and why that's important. Oops, not that one. That's me.
Now available at DennisDaily.com. Now, guys, this video probably the last thing you were expecting, okay? I know it's a little bit out there. It's not something that we really do much on this channel, but we're playing another camping game.
Excuse me. And there you go. And so, and what's happening now is, and while it seems divisive, right? We have to be aware of what the ramifications are, because the precedent is what you're looking to establish at a Supreme Court level. It's the precedent that there are non-protected and there are areas of non-protection. Turn it down or turn it off. There are areas or there are groups or there are people and issues that should not be protected. There are issues, there are areas, there are people, there are groups that should not be protected under civil rights laws. So on one end, you have those who said there are areas, there are peoples, there are groups who should not be protected under civil rights laws. And I'll give you an example. People who want to marry their dogs. They do have dog marriage ceremonies, dog between dog, where they can actually give you a certificate and say these two animals are married. But in this case, as you remember, it was the gay rights, the right to marry, and now the right to not face firing or the non-hiring in the workforce based on sexual orientation or preference, gender identity, all of those things. And so they're taking it, they're challenging it from the LGBT community space. They have a couple of cases that are out there that they want heard. Dangerous and scary times. Dangerous and scary times. I'll give a little bit more from what they're saying, and then I'll dive into my perspective on the Title VII itself. Oh my God. So something just happened once again to my computer. It has denied me all access. They just don't want me to be great. That's what's up. How do they do that?
Nice. I think there's a mouse right there. Not like a rat, but like a on the table right there that Zania uses. Can you bring that to me? This thing is killing me, man. Appreciate. So now this is crazy because I've been locked out of my ability to control my computer. The video's still going. And unless I get it back, the video will just keep going. And I won't be able to stop this. There it is. All right. So this is where we're at. And then, so let's jump into the next section. Oh, crap. You know what? It is not giving me that at all. So let's do it this way. Title. Stamp. You know what? I'm going to assume that most folks who rock with us in the B1 Network or rock with Brother Moses already have a pretty firm grasp of the connection to the Title VII and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I'm not going to go through all the exact words of that. Rather, take you one step further to the precedent. And I'll give you the images. That way we can have the conversation a little bit more freely on our side. Let me see, make sure here. Are we still good? B1 for life. Peace, brother. Oh, yeah, they could probably call you homophobic. No disrespect there because of ignorance. A lot of this shit, I believe, is still just religious. It depends on how open or progressive your church may have been, or your grandmother's church, or your grandfather's household. If you lived with him at any point in time, for each their very own. There are a lot of us who are on a scale of progressiveness. We're not there yet. I'm not all the way there with like transgenders or the big T or whatever it is. L's lesbianism was something that was easier to accept because of the mediums that were available, the music, and everybody, my girl got a girlfriend type of comments and commentary, seeing it in public. When it was two women, it seemed to be an intimate or something like that, almost like a fantasy thing. Being a player and all of that for the guys. I mean, so for the women, I don't know how hard discrimination was for, lesbians or discrimination against lesbians. So the L is a significant one. But they weren't the people in positions of power in most cases. When you think of the L, you think of the women. When you think of the G, now that's where you actually do have a historical precedent for governance as a G, and trying to suppress that feeling while behind closed doors in the bathhouses and where the decisions are made on the golf courses now today. That's where the G's have, I think Dave Chappelle says it, they got white men in the G's. Athens, Romans, Greeks, they have a history and a legacy of that behavior, male on male contact. It's just sex to them in that sense. And so somebody could call you homophobic by then trying to judge you based off of the comments that you make. But it's still irrelevant in our grand scheme of things, because we're looking at this as an attack on the 1866 Civil Rights Bill, or in the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. We're looking at it as an attack on human rights, because they are using what we had created as a platform, the LGBTQ. Remember, it starts off with, they'll also say that they hijacked the African-American or the pro-black or the black movement. They've hijacked black civil rights or civil rights in America. But no, black people leading this protest against those areas where humans are being discriminated against,
they found an inlet and they're using it to say one of those levers, which is economics. We've also shared the discrimination. We share that experience of discrimination, and we want to use as a precedent this same platform, the civil rights, and we want to use it particularly for these areas. And if you all want to continue to go down the line of black hair as your civil rights cases that you want to fight, and you want to peel back discrimination based on black hair, then so be it. They're going after a bigger one that I would see in this case. If you put them up, the Crown Act versus this one. If you put up what on the other end, what they're doing, which is opportunity zones. If you put up on the other end, what the white governors and leadership, those who are on even more bigoted, like they could call us homophobic all they want. That's them for them to determine. But the people who are in the positions of power and authority, the things that they are doing that are egregious violations of human rights from either a Marxist or a communist or even a socialist perspective, or even just a black first perspective, or one that's just more humanitarian, peace loving and free, a red ideology, almost not red pill, but a freedom and freedom loving ideology. What they're doing on the other end is egregious. So even when you look at the medicinal marijuana acts or the marijuana reinvestment act posed, that's one. Let me give you that one. I don't like to do too much talking. Let's do a little bit more showing today. But as we use these certain platforms, civil rights bills, Supreme Court justice cases, anything like that, to create the world that's a little bit more equitable or more fair, if that's what you want. Remember that we are using these platforms against somebody who is actually trying to use those same platforms or other platforms to do the exact opposite of the things that you would like to see. And those people, that fight is still very real and still very tangible. And we just have a whole bunch of people who look like us who are not willing to fight that battle today. Oh, my Amazon came in. Thank you, baby. It looks good. Thanks for ordering. See, I got my daughter. She's a part of the business, family business. She orders the things on Amazon, like new headphones and HDMI cords and such. She mostly orders things for herself, but every once in a while she can throw in an order for me. So shout out that family business idea for those who didn't believe that it was a thing. Marijuana, what is the Reinvestment Act or something like that? What is it called? Harris. So Kamala Harris is pushing this one forward, and a lot of people really aren't. Oh, the normal. That's a big one. The Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. You won't hear a lot about this, but you got to look at it from both sides, right? The Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act is a bipartisan legislation that, oh, you can't see that. Why do they come in with these little bitty font sizes that only work for very young people with very good eyes? So it's called MORE, Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. That removes marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act, thus decriminalizing the substance at the federal level and enabling states, so it becomes states' rights. And that's the big reason why you have to continue to jump all the way back into the 1866, because they're saying who's responsible for the enforcement? What happens if you are discriminated against? What happens if you are a victim of something you shouldn't be? Some white man with a gun, a blue uniform, and a little piece of silver on his chest wants to violate your civil rights, and you might have the right for open use, carry, smoke a marijuana card. But that white boy with a gun and a badge then determines that, no, I am the law around here. By them saying that this is for the states to determine, now you are still beholden under the authority of the state enforcement, law enforcement. And when your state law enforcement isn't as progressive as your bills or your codes may have been, then you can still have, like California, where millions of young African Americans were locked up, even though it was supposedly legal. It was supposed to be all right. But what you'll also find here, the act would also allow the existing state legal marijuana industry to no longer be barred from accessing financial services or standard tax treatment as every other legal business. You need the language. Right now, there is a prohibition against it that is killing our economies. There's cash crops out there that have to go to the black market because of the way that these laws and things are being written and the words that they don't say. Similarly, veterans will have access to better medical marijuana, with VA doctors no longer risking federal prosecution for filling out state legal medical recommendations. So there was a lot there. Unfortunately, it goes into so much detail, I won't stay there. But what I will say is that similar to these incidences, you are fighting. You are in a, well, let me say you're not fighting, but you are in a battle. I'll say that. You are in a battle, and the battle will continue whether you're aware of it or not. And the millions of African Americans who had been snatched off the streets and thrown in a fucking dungeon are now trying to see, well, can I create a life now that I'm out here? Now that you've already taken years upon years, you can work 8 hours a day. Hustlers, on the other hand, might be working 9 to 13 hours a day if they're really invested in their business. And that's a fact. 9 to 13 hours a day. The rest, they might play Madden, they might chill with homies and such. But in that time of standing on that block, before they were arrested, they started learning the mathematics, they started learning the measurements, the growth processes, the flavors or the different strands. They learned their products. They learned so much about it. Just to be snatched off the street because it started as a politician who said there should be a ban, and then it moved into an area where they were defenseless against the resolution that says, well, the state has the right to determine, because now the state has appointed those people who come in and say, well, this is law. These are the laws that we shall enforce. And here are the specific areas where we will be enforcing said laws. All right. Now take it a step further. As a black man, believe me, the law is not colorblind. They see very clearly, which is why in the 90s, it was about racial profiling. It was all about racial profiling. It was about probable cause. Who won that? They did, because it was states' rights to determine, and in the court of law and in their enforcement, they won the right to say, well, I pulled you over or I arrested you, not just racial profiling. It wasn't about race, but probably because you did something. And it wasn't beholden on them to defend why they pulled you over, probably cause or probable cause. It wasn't beholden upon them. They sided on their side and say, well, for whatever reason that they decide to arrest you, you can be arrested for whatever reason. You know, it's race. You know, in the pit of your stomach, it was because you're black. You know, and or because you were a woman, or right now LGBTQ, it was because they are gay, or because they are, not G, they are B, bisexual, or because they are a T, transsexual. They know without any shadow of a doubt. But in the court of law, equal protection under the law, in the court of law, it's not playing out that way. And the person who's responsible for proving the wrong that was done is the actual victim. And you have African Americans who say, oh, you guys do a lot of victim blaming. And so they are siding with the other side of the argument that makes it next to impossible to have a more just society. Makes it next to impossible. Because again, you will never be able to infiltrate the hearts and minds of those who do not have a humanitarian or a people first outlook. And so I go deep. I go all the way in on the different civilizations. I go deep. I like the war channels. I like to infuse military science inside of what I'm referring to, just so people can get a more comprehensive understanding. That 1866, I like history, for example. 1866 was 1 year after. So this is year one civil rights bill. And the 1866 civil rights bill was about economic contracts and the ability for an African or an American descendant of slavery and of African descent to enter into contracts freely and exit from contracts. Because the thing is, yeah, you might not be my slave anymore, but now I'm going to put you under a contract. You have, I'll give you, this is a rant here, but this is just for those who are familiar. One of my favorite rappers said, you got a price on your head. Baller niggas want to see you dead. It's a 50G contract. I don't know what you did, but they want to kill you, your wife, and your kids on contact. Now that rapper, I think he actually rapped that verse while he was incarcerated, but a price on your head. So they'll put a contract on you, and they were running, people were trying to migrate. For those who were smart, they were trying to migrate the fuck out of the South. Just get away. If there is nothing you can say to convince that person who has just killed damn near 50,000 white people in order to sustain this, then there's probably nothing that you can say. Because remember, again, after they had killed these same people, this same military coup people or whatever it is, after they killed Abraham Lincoln, or the American president, after they assassinated him, they reappointed that same slave holding class back into positions of leadership and authority, of governance inside of those cities and states and towns where black people lived, where the majority lived. And that rate, you are my slave mentality, you are my property, you cannot sue me. That same mentality was not going to overcome itself. That same way of thinking, that same perspective was not going to overcome itself. So here we are today, 150 years later. Is that right? What was that? 96, 130 years, something like that. It was 66. So yeah, over 150 years later, and we still have these same slave cornrow arguments. I feel like I said something right there. The LGBT community, again, that's not my fight particularly, but because they are using a platform that is connected to me, it's outside of my own interest to argue against their victory. It is outside of my own interest for them to degrade the Civil Rights Act's gains, or to scale back and to restrict the rights afforded under the Civil Rights Act, whether the 1800s or the 1960 Civil Rights Act. It's outside of my own interest to argue against it. The time to argue against it would have been before they made it to the Supreme Court justice. If you are one of those people who really just don't like gays, and you are what they accuse some of the folks in the other chats of being, homophobic, if that's what you are, then it would have been beholden upon you and your communities to say whatever you needed to say before the shit made to the Supreme Court justice. But now that it's there, Brother George Macon, now that it is there, African Americans got to partner with, we got to be their ally, and we got to be 100% backed on that, because we cannot afford, now that they're using it, you can't, now that they got your, well, I'm gonna just use your address and get my mail sent here. Yeah, that's all good until you found out that the person that's trying to use your address to get their mail sent there, the type of mail that they have is still technically illegal in 23 states. Now you are tied and inextricably bound to the success or the outcome of this Supreme Court justice hearing. And there's nothing you can do about it at this point. Now your fate is still inextricably bound with that of the LGBT community. You don't have to become an ally, and it's too late to become an opponent. Facts. That's what I feel about it, Brother George. You don't have to like it personally, but it's too late to try to oppose it now that it's there. Now that it is there, it is too late. So what is this one? This is the one that's actually having the deeper ramifications. It's a little bit more right on point when it comes to economics, and it's right on point with HR 40, class action lawsuits against businesses or establishments that use discrimination at their whim, as a weapon or as a lever against entire groups or people or persons or properties. This is the one. And in order to judge on the LGBTQ cases, they're also going to have to consider the ramifications of the Comcast, because they are using the same civil rights, 1964 civil rights platform. The response has to be consistent, right? Because this is an interpretation of constitutional right. Again, I think it could go over folks' heads, or it might be a little bit too advanced to jump into like the Supreme Court's cases themselves. I think the easier starting point is always Wikipedia. And then from there, you can take it out into the broader cases. Absolutely. Again, don't be fooled by, oh, this is for gay people. Do gay people have the right to get hired or fired? That is not where the battle actually is. That's just the language that makes it palatable for the common person. The argument here that is being laid out with these Supreme Court justices is, and I'm going to slow it down as much as I can, whose burden is it to prove when a wrong has been committed? That's what the argument is. Who has the burden of enforcement? That's what is being argued here. Don't be fooled or lured into, oh no, this is just another expansion of gay rights. They want to marry cats and dogs, and it's slowly becoming Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't fall for the biblical references or spiritual illusion. That's not what this is about. This is about whose burden is it to prove a wrong has been committed. And right now, the ownership class or the big business, Comcast, Bank of America, if we ever wanted a class action lawsuit, HR 40 related or reparations related to all financial institutions that aim to benefit and propagated slavery and partnered with the American government to institute insurance claims and anything like that in the form of slavery. We wanted our reparations, and we want it to come through these primary institutions who are still benefiting from the profit of our ancestors' labor. And we want to file a mass class action lawsuit against them. And so we try to bring that up, and we finally find a real lawyer and a real judge, and you do everything that you need, and we get real marketing and social media, everything behind it. When we take that to court, what these cases, the Comcast case and the LGBTQ case, all of those three cases, what they are arguing is, whose job is it to prove it? So you say my job discriminates against African American women. They say prove it. So now you're like, well, how am I going to prove it? I am now responsible for going back to my job and asking them for the evidence needed to prosecute them. Does that make sense? When you go to the government and say, well, the government was complicit in it, they're saying prove it. And so now you have to go to that same government and ask them for the evidence used to prosecute them. They just don't do it. Dirty police officers or police officers, you can look at their track record or their arrest record and look at how many or disproportionately they've arrested or incarcerated one community or one group over the other group. And so you say, look, I think I have a police officer here in our unit or in our community who is disproportionately targeting African Americans. And so I would like to file a lawsuit against them. And you try to file a lawsuit and they say, prove it. And so how do you prove it? You're going to have to go down there and request information from that same precinct or from that same office, records and data and statistics to sue, excuse me, to prosecute against them. And the likelihood is just not to happen. You can have you a good lawyer. That does not mean they're going to play ball. There will be a fire in that basement before you get a police officer who is going to turn around and just incriminate himself by releasing that information. They will protect themselves is where we're at. And so by the Supreme Court justice, let's just play it out. On one side, the Supreme Court justice says, you know what? Comcast is absolutely right. African-American brother, you are absolutely wrong. I'm sorry. I assume that people already know what the Comcast case is about. So excuse me there. Oh my goodness. What did they put this in font? Nothing. Nephew. Nephew. God damn. What's the use of having kids if they don't get up and do shit when you need them to do shit? I got like a sunbeam that's right in my face, and the only way I can block it is to get up and turn that. But all right, I'm gonna try to get you a little bit more on the screen here. So I brought up the actual PDF version for us here. All right. And so it's necessary. And y'all let me know in the chat if you rocking with me. Give me a thumbs up or something. But in the chat, if there's other broader YouTubers who are going to be going live, just let me know. And then I'll know to start wrapping it up. But my big brother George Macon asked me for some information about this case, asked for my opinion. It's a lot. It's too much just for me to have in one conversation. As you see, there's moving parts and nuances. We started off just giving an example of using the Civil Rights Act as a platform for other areas to identify, look, we've been discriminated in not just, employment, but also in housing and other areas. But I used employment as our example and used the Crown Act there in California, which was the first one. And that just got pushed through in July. But it gives at least one of those areas. You wouldn't even know if you were discriminated at work based on certain characteristics that prove race. The point is right now, it's on the people themselves who feel like they're being discriminated against to prove that they're being discriminated against. And so how do you go about proving discrimination? Even when it's like little things, like you're like, well, it's the little things. And that's what you want to say. It's like, look, man, I can tell you that they've done nothing but hired white people. I can tell you that they've done nothing but give promotions to people, for whatever reasons. So promotions or whatever it is. I can tell you that when it comes to our reviews, Black people get harsher criticism. That when you look at our mid-year review or our end of the year review, it's a lot of critical stuff. And the opportunity areas that are identified on those mid-year reviews have long-lasting adverse impacts on the professional careers of African Americans disproportionately. And I can also tell you subjectively that the things that are listed on those reviews, those critiques, are things that are about character. And because it's about character, they're speaking to the judge or the person who's criticizing the character of African Americans. Now, even after doing all that and setting up that premise, I'll tell you that the only reason they feel that way is because they have a problem with the African American character. They have a problem with the boldness of our sisters, the creativeness and the connection that our sisters inside of corporate America or inside of these spaces have when it comes to presenting information. They may prefer somebody who, well, when I did the process and I evaluated the methods of this, I'll tell you that with 5% margin of error that I am accurate when it comes to analyzing this information. And so they like when they prefer people who speak like that over the professional communication style of someone who'll keep it a little bit plain and tell you like it is. Look, inside of these areas, we have a challenged demographic. We have a demographic that's been challenged economically for years. The ability for them to keep a job isn't just determined upon their skill set. It's not a heavily entrepreneurial based or successful entrepreneurial based community that I serve. And so their finances are always going to be a little bit more rocky. For them, flexible payment arrangements are always going to be preferable. And then the monthly payment, by having multiple instances where they may need to piece up in order to get that monthly payment to you all, that would be the best bet in order to cater to this demographic. They don't want to hear people who talk like that. And because they hear our sisters or our brothers inside of corporate spaces who speak a little bit more passionately or say, look, they're broke. I deal with the lowest FICO scores inside of the city in a banking element. And in order to help many of those folks get approved, you have to understand why they face these challenges. Their households are larger and stretched, and they got to do extra side hustles just to make their regular bills meet. And because I'm dealing with this demographic, we have to be a little bit more creative in how we go to market, or we will continue to have an adverse impact on them economically. They'll apply for our products and continue to be declined. It was a hard look. They got another decline. Because it was a hard look, credit scores are looking at how many times did you ask for credit and how recently. And they asked again, so they take off a few points there. Why didn't they get approved? Because their credit score is low. And now that they've applied for some assistance to get whatever they need, whether it's retail or healthcare or whatever it needs, they were declined. So it goes down a little bit more. All right. That adverse impact that just comes with being poor in America. But it's not just because they were poor in America, but because they had African Americans who were dismissed or discriminated against inside the workforce because of stupid ass shit like their hair. It had nothing to do with what they said at all. But the other people inside those rooms with those African American bodies did not like my sister's cornrows. And so nothing that sister said inside of that meeting mattered. All they could focus on was her weave. They couldn't hear a word she said. And the brothers there with the dreads trying to do the right thing and talk data and numbers, they couldn't hear a word he said because the brother hadn't shaved his facial hair off. And we live in a society that discriminates against things like that. And there is absolutely nothing we can do against the people who are discriminating against them from a legal point of view, because our courts say, well, that's on you to prove that they discriminated against you based on race. For the LGBT community, this case says prove that they discriminated against you because of your sexual orientation specifically. All right. So unless you get and then even then, remember that even then, they have audio footage of people like, Donald Trump in the locker room saying, grab him by the pussy. They have that shit. Even audio footage is not going to be enough to overcome this shit. We are not going to not get discriminated against by those people who choose to discriminate against us for whatever reason. All right, let me jump into this. I put it on the screen, but it still looks, when I'm looking at it, it looks a little bit blurry. I thought I made it a little bit bigger, but maybe we can try to. Do it one more. Yeah, that's still looking all fuzzy. Why is it going way over there? I always go back in history and everything because I'm not an asshole and I'm not ignorant, and because I like it. And because in the United States Supreme Court, or in all the courts, also inside the medical space, you will still find Latin and those words. And the influence of the Roman Empire is still heavily pressed upon us. And it is a rule by might, not by right. It's by might. That carry the big stick mentality. And so those who can have the big stick are going to be the ones who exercise the most dominance inside of these spaces, like the court of law. It's not unbiased. It's not human. It is systematic thinking or broad thinking. Certiorari. I took Latin in like the 7th grade. So no, I don't remember how to say this dead ass language, but I do know like root words like certify or to make official to the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Number 11-864 argued November 5th, 2012, decided on March 27th, 2013. So it took them about 5 months since it was argued to decide. The petitioners, Comcast Corporation and its subsidiaries, so it includes all of them, allegedly cluster their cable television operations within a particular region by swapping their systems outside the region for competitor systems inside the region. Respondents, named plaintiffs in this class action antitrust suit, claim that they and other Comcast subscribers in the Philadelphia cluster are harmed because Comcast strategy lessens competition and leads to super competitive prices. They sought class certification under federal rule of the Civil Procedure 23B3, which requires that questions of law or fact common to class members predominate over any questions affecting only an individual member. I'll pause right there and just tell you I feel the same way. A lot of people want to do the individual. Well, I'm an individual and, you know, me and my family are all right. And I say, all right, good. Now, please disconnect the call and let the conversation continue with people who have the capacity to speak from a broader lens, a greater worldview, one that can recognize a free market system and how viable it is for a free market system to not have monopolies in it. Somebody who can speak like that as a counterpoint and say, look, they were trying to become a major monopoly. And we've all played the game Monopoly, Boardwalk, Jumpin', but we didn't have to accept that those were the only monopolies on the board. The person who can create a monopoly seems to win the game of Monopoly, but the game itself is about antitrust laws. Why? Because once you have monopolized on a certain area or a space, now you can insert price controls. You can get funny with the church's money. Things that normally would only be $5 can now be $5,000. Facts. It would cost you less than $5 to get your legal case notarized and sent through. But if you have to get a lawyer, it is now $5,000 minimum on stupid shit. I digress and I move forward. So, questions of law or fact common to class members predominate over any questions affecting only individual members. The district court required them to show. So again, remember, this is about who has the burden of proof that the antitrust impact of the violation could be proved at trial through evidence common to the class, not just one individual, and that the damages were measurable on a class-wide basis. Pause again. So there was two things that you have to show. The district court required Comcast to show that the antitrust violation could be proved at trial through evidence common to the class, and that there were damages that were measurable on a class-wide scale. I'm going to take this and gladly insert to two scenarios that I love to use: medicinal marijuana and the egregious impact of marijuana, of the ban on marijuana in certain spaces. And now you look at it and it's super legal in more than 27 states, like 33 now. It's beyond legal. And so the same actual actions, the having, the cultivation, the distribution, the warehousing, all of those same key elements of the marijuana industry where African Americans were disproportionately locked up and lost vital productivity. Their labor hours were gone and sold to the prison industrial system and the privatized prisons. Their labor hours were sold to them. They were technically, and in every sense of the word, enslaved due to white people with guns operating under the law or the state law system. And the only rebuttal, I don't give a fuck about more. More seems pretty good, but more is for those businesses who are already in a position to invest and capitalize. My major emphasis is on the latter part. Those folks who they have a class action lawsuit against the federal government. You can't just tell me, well, that was the law. That wasn't the law. That was a hijacking or a bastardization of the democratic process and of the capitalist system by those folks who did not have American interests at heart. And there's probably not much that I can do as a single individual to say, look, even if I identified the actual key people themselves and told you who they were and how these white supremacists hijacked our system, right now with the way American systems are designed, there's nothing we can do about it. And that's the fact. Because it would still be beholden upon me to prove that that individual did it just because these folks were black, just because they were Mexican, just because they were LGBTQ. Yeah, I want to go through this one just because of you got to watch for the twist. And I just want to share the twist. There's a plot twist that comes. The damages were measurable. So number one, antitrust violation has to be proved. You have to have your evidence, and it has to be something on a class scale. Also, you have to be able to prove that there are damages measurable on a class scale using a common methodology. The court accepted only one of the respondents' four proposed theories of antitrust impact, that Comcast's actions lessened competition from overbuilders, i.e. companies that build competing networks in areas where an incumbent cable company already operates. I'll give you the real life ramification. They wanted, it used to be AT&T and all of that shit like that. It probably still is in some way connected to them. But fiber optic cables, they didn't just pop up. And then the ability to use like satellite cable and all those other folks, there's small players in there that you may have been able to go to that had to get permits. And, we need to build under these streets. We need to do that. And we need to work with the government. That's where they were biggest, is that making it so hard on those little players to get in and actually build out their networks, and then to actually get in and get the fiber optic cables and things like that are needed inside certain spaces. And so that was the one that they tried to do. They tried to say, well, look, they're specifically targeting these spaces where the competitors are going in and trying to establish competing networks in those areas where they've maybe been the incumbent or where they can buy out the incumbent and such. It then certified, It then certified the class, finding that the damages from the overbuilder deterrence could be calculated on a class-wide basis, even though respondent experts acknowledged that his regression model did not isolate damages resulting from any one of the respondent's theories. In affirming, a big mouthful to say, they put it in an Excel spreadsheet. All the zip code, you break it down like this, if you can just envision it with me. An Excel spreadsheet. What they did was say, now give me a list of all the addresses where you feel may have been adversely impacted by this cable Comcast. Show me all of those subscribers. Let's do it in real time from a business lens. All of the subscribers who are now paying $60 a month rather than using one of the competitors $20 or $19.99 per month. Show me the impacts of that. And so they could find that there were 10,000, let's say for a sample size, 10,000. And so when they're saying, well, what are the actual damages? Put it in there. Now show me in your Excel spreadsheet what would have happened had Comcast not come in and bullied them out of the building space for those new networks or the faster internet. So long story short, I'm able as Comcast to deliver a faster internet service. I'm able to deliver it for a lot more affordable than I used to be able to, like your Sprint or whoever it is. And I'm able to do so. I'm able to reach more people inside the community. And they say, well, how are you able to do that? What this was looking at was they were able to do that because they were able to block out their competition. Why is that important to African Americans? Fuck cable. Take it to the next level. It is important for you to understand that you have to compete inside of market spaces. And in your ability to compete inside of market spaces, let's say a real tangible product, a store or a service that you want to bring in, there are actions and levers that can be pulled by the existing or what they call the incumbent companies that are already operating in those areas. And whenever you go up against the economic viability of an incumbent, they will assess you from your terms of risk. They will, your risk being how many subscribers you may be able to lose, you lure away from them in certain areas. How many of those subscribers off of that Excel spreadsheet are likely to go over to you? They're going to assess you off of your capabilities, your reach, off of your assets. Well, how much fiber optic cable in this sense does that person have the ability to lay? Or whatever your business is, they'll come after you, long story short. And when they come after you, remember, we are talking about peaceful, non-violent. You're trying to use the system to your advantage, but you have somebody who has the ends and the means to achieve those ends coming after you. And these bigger players have influence with people inside of those spaces when they say it's a state law. So state law might be, I'll give you an example. You can only build fiber optic cables 6 feet deep. They have to be as a prerequisite or a law. So what does that mean to you as somebody who wants to come in as a minority owned group and you want to actually compete in these spaces? For you, 6 feet is the difference. You'll measure it like this. You'll say, well, it costs me about $13 per foot that I have to build down. All right, $13 per foot, and the tools, the labor, and then distance. So for them to be able to get this state to say 6 feet, here's a lever that they'll pull. Oh, well, we've just done some studies and we're finding that 6 feet is no longer the recommended depth of underground cables, but that it is now better or more efficient because of the radio waves or whatever the report says, that it now has to be 7 feet. And you don't have the ability to keep fighting against 7 feet versus 6 feet versus 9 feet. All you have the ability to do is file a grievance and to say, well, that doesn't seem right. Or in the many cases of African Americans who people call the victim, say, but that's not fair. Your ability to compete inside of these spaces on any level of a mass, they used the word class level. On a class level, we call it mass scale or critical mass, to compete in broader industries or in broader spaces are going to be critically impaired if you don't understand the link between business and government and economics. The role that the government plays in sustaining or picking the winners and losers. All right, I just want to finish this one out because the plot twist is good. It then certified the class, finding that the damages from the overbuilder deterrence. So I can put as a deterrence things that just make it impossible for you to build up the scale. I'll give some very common examples that Black folks I know use. Like they want the storefront. They knew that the barbershop was an area. And so they'll even go to school for like cosmetology and such. They're playing the game. See, you have the skill set, but they've come in and said, well, if you don't have a barber's license, you can cost that business. You can lose that business, or you lose your right to provide a service in America based on this law that had been put in by bigger companies or companies that have more money, bigger schools, universities, education system. Education system is another business that said, no, I want to sell you this skill set, even though you already have it. They say, I want to sell it. And the only way as the education system they can profit is to then work with the federal government to create a system of discrimination against people who don't have to buy their services, to force people to buy their services. And so to be in cohorts with the government or a government contract is good. Yeah, I can get a government contract to teach or to, fulfill some order that they need. But the best government contracts that you could sign up for are the ones that discriminate against your opponents. And that is institutional racism at its finest, is the ability to get to lock out other competitors in business, in politics, and in economics, politics, religion, leadership class, home ownership, land, everything. Lock them out the best you can. And in order to do so, and you'll see this throughout in the entire legacy of the history of African Americans, in order to do so, they've always had an open and willing partnership with the American government, and that's facts. So slavery and reparations and all of that, and reparations, why is it a major issue? Is because the government has always been not just a complicit party, but a player. Equal rights under the law has not been afforded, not to the contracts that we were able to enter into or exit from. The contracts that were actually signed with the privatization or the prisons and all of that stuff were the ones that are the Fugitive Slave Act. What do you think that is? That is giving the authority to a white man to go and grab a black man or a black woman or a black child for no other reason than because they're black. Damn near sounds like an RBR. I need to send RBR the link. He needs to come up here and have a conversation with me about this shit. But let me finish this out and then I'm going to log off. Damn, it's 1:51, but it's worth it. And affirming, the Third Circuit refused to consider the petitioner's argument. Comcast got shut down. And affirming, the Third Circuit refused to consider petitioner's argument that the model failed to attribute damages to overbuilder deterrence because doing so would require reaching the merits of respondents' claims at the class certification stage. So Comcast would have had to go directly at the people filing the claim against Comcast. The burden of proof, Comcast now has to prove. Comcast doesn't want to prove. The people want Comcast to prove that you didn't. Prove that what you did, prove that it's hard to explain. Look, bullying happens. And oftentimes, this will be my last analogy, and then I'm going to get back to it because I was working on music and stuff. But thanks again. Shout out to Little Miss Chocolate for letting me get what I needed done, which was the actual sharing of a link. Once again, I do know how to do that now. Bang. Faster than ever. And so that was the skill set I wanted to develop so that I can be able to collaborate a little bit more and in real time. But moving from that, I did want to respond to my brother George Macon, who had asked me what were my thoughts on the LGBTQ or LGBT cases going to the Supreme Court justice. Give you a quick recap of where I'm at, and then give one more storytelling time analogy to lock it in. So to recap, we started off with the video, which goes in about how it's connected, how the LGBT cases are connected to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which then, as we know, connects it to the Civil Rights Act of 1866. They're talking about it from a Title VII lens, and they're talking about it as employment and discrimination in the workforce. More than that, the Comcast case is important because class action lawsuits and the ability to look at a thing from an individual or a group, and specifically right here, who has the responsibility of proving the case. Don't prove that you didn't do, don't prove that what you think you did was right. Answer these questions about things that could potentially be used against you in a court of law. Answer the questions that could be potentially used against you in a court of law. If you, as an individual, have a lawsuit or something at your job and you're saying, look, they've been discriminatory, I pressed the button and these things happened. In that situation, it would be telling your employer to release the information that shows the person that you're filing a claim against or whatever is actually guilty. Right now, they do not have anything on the books. Like right now, it's the opposite. You're supposedly innocent until proven guilty. We know we don't get the benefit of that. And supposedly, you have the right to remain silent, but we know we don't get the benefit of that. What we do know is that anything you say can and will be used against you. And that's where our dilemma is. There are things that happen that can and should be used against bigger players, corporations, banks. Go turn it off for me. Banks, corporations, and even the federal government that there is no accountability for. They have like a government accountability board, but there is no accountability for it. And when you look at areas like housing discrimination, I'll give you one, redlining, and you bring it all the way into modern times and say housing discrimination and how are we impacted by that today? And how many housing discrimination claims have been filed? And what is the outcome of filing a housing discrimination claim? Oh, sorry, recap. So I started there. Credibility statement months ago, back in April, when I first started getting wind of the Supreme Court justices' cases and their ramifications. I already knew. Like I jumped right to it. I was like, oh shit, they are attempting to open up the you cannot discriminate based on race, gender, religion. They're attempting to open that up. Now, the problem is if you lose this high stakes game, then that allows for the shutting down of even those other spaces. So it's not, it says it is not illegal to discriminate against LGBTQ. That's the way that most people take it. They interpret it as, oh, if the LGBTQ community loses this case, then that will establish a precedent that says it is not illegal to discriminate. The LGBTQ, their side, again, they're coming out and saying, look, we want it to be on record that it is not okay and that there is a such thing as discrimination against a person based on the fact that they are LGBTQ. And we want it to be known. We want a precedent in the Supreme Court that says discrimination against the LGBTQ should not be tolerated. That's where many people are interpreting the argument, is that discrimination right now, LGBTQ are saying, look, based on what you currently have inside of the 1964 language, based on what's currently there is no discriminating against the LGBT. Just like in the military and certain spaces, there was no rape against a man. There just wasn't no law like that. It just wasn't on the books. There was nothing there. There was nothing. The beating of a woman, your own wife, your wife being your own property. There was nothing there until there was something on the books, or the Feminista Jones movement, as people like to call it. But those key areas where they've identified, look, the Supreme Court justices ruled on many different opinions. Right here, we think that there is an opportunity to make and to seal in concrete. That's where the LGBT are pushing towards. It's an admirable thing to say, but it's earmarked to the civil rights that I'm impacted by. So I was interested in it. So I reached out and I just did the basic and humane thing and asked him, when do you believe that they'll be ruling on it? And I asked the chairman of the Democratic caucus at the or the chairman for the LGBT caucus for the Democratic National Committee. So you don't just ask the president, because the Democratic National Committee is broken down into certain caucuses in different areas that they want to they have expertise and leadership, and they govern those different areas. The one that's winning today isn't the one on just open human rights. It isn't the one on prison reform. That is not the one that's winning, although some people can look and try to count as a victory the First Step Act as a victory. You would have to go back, find the caucus leader or the chairman of that caucus for prison reform or whatever it is. and other areas, employment discrimination and such. But this is the one for the LGBT caucus, and he is the chairman of that group. And so I reached out to him specifically because this issue is on his table. From that, jumped into the actual bill that was an offshoot. But this is an example, which was the California Crown Act, an example of where you're trying to use the same platform or civil rights or the idea that people should not be discriminated against. That is the premise off tops. You should not discriminate against people. In a capitalist society, whoever has the best skills should get the job. But personalities come into place and personal egos, and that's where employment or places of employment or managers are able to say, well, fit is important. We have a culture that's also important, and they get to use these loose words in order to justify hiring decisions or firing decisions. For the African American, the argument had always been last hired, first fired. And in order to combat that, they started to identify certain areas and try to press them as court cases, at least to get bills on the books that they can refer to when they're saying you are discriminating against. And here is where that section is found. The next steps are to take this type of information and say, this is a victory, and to claim it as a victory and say, African-American woman, have you ever felt discriminated against inside of the workplace? Your discrimination, the comments, what was it? What form did it take? If you would be willing to share your testimony, please. And I think that's the next thing that they have to go towards, is to actually get the stories and testimonies out there of the African-American woman who can tell you these testimonies in real time. And even if the class action lawsuit fails, which is an economic lever to fight back peacefully against white supremacist terrorists, that's the only way you can do it. All other profits that they generate through discrimination and all other things are still going to continue to funnel to those same folks with these same ideologies. And those profits are what incentivize them to not make any changes from the current status quo. So discrimination will continue to just be a thing that Black folks have to just accept. You just got to accept it. Why? Because profits show that it's profitable. And the profits only show that it's profitable because they are able to discriminate against those other folks. You're not mitigating any losses. You're just saying, well, you don't know if it could have been even more profitable because you've shut down the Black folks and the business of the Black folks out the gate. You've shut down Marxism or communism or socialism at the gate with weapons of destruction and war and politics and such. Kenny, man, thanks for joining, man. About 2 hours late, but I've got respect for you, brother. Thanks for coming in. I was going to send you the link this morning and see if I could get you on just so I could go through that. So next time I invite folks to come on and have that conversation, I don't leave them in the chat area without actually bringing them up. So appreciate it. But yeah, man, I'm going to close this thing out with a story. I'm just in my recap mode now, and I've been going long-winded. I knew I could be long-winded, but Jesus, 2 hours already, and I didn't even realize it. But let me jump into it. Another section of it is looking at actual Title VII. I would expect folks to actually have some standing knowledge of what Title VII already is as a part of the Civil Rights Act and the areas that it touches on. Oh, Shay, peace, brother. Man, y'all coming in now and getting active, man. I can send y'all the link and we could just have a conversation, or we can go that route. I was just gonna shut it down. I didn't have like my standard PowerPoint slide with a very scripted layout for this one, but I added the second display monitor so I can go back and forth and actually see folks who are in the chat. And then I added how do I share the links? And we had one of our sisters, Little Miss Chocolate, who actually helped me out with that. And then, and that was early in the beginning. And then right now, just answering the questions for Brother George Macon. He was like, man, what's your opinion about the LGBT Supreme Court cases that are going down? And they should have some form of resolution, or they should be at least discussed by us, because it will come through those pipelines. And before you know it, the Supreme Court justice will already say yes or no, or affirmed or declined, or however they say it. My opinion on the first case, even if you're not for it as an individual, brother O'Shea, even if I don't like gays. I'm sorry, I don't like the G. I don't have as much as a problem with the L's and the G's. It's somewhat like the Dave Chappelle Sticks and Stones. LGB. The B's definitely that I trust a lot less the B's because they can move more fluidly throughout society, adopting the mannerisms of either someone that is straight or homosexual. And so you just can't really trust it. In my own personal opinion, it's hard to trust the L's. I've always had a favorable position on, but for me, that's always been regarding women and women who choose to be with other women. But that was through some erotica or whatever that might be. The G's, I just said leave alone, but that comes from religion, right? That comes from the church that would give them a role as the choir director or something to where they didn't feel completely ostracized, but that it was also a part of the entertainment aspect of being in church because the people in the front row really didn't like it. And they always had those little snarky ass comments about the gays inside of the Black community. And so it has been something that's always been a bit taboo that I know of in the Black community is just don't be gay. And all the different nuances like Dave Chappelle brings out, even the words used that are most harmful or indirect, like faggot. Don't say faggot. You can say nigga all day, but don't say faggot. And bitch or whore, slut, pussy, cunt, all of those other things that are censored. But yeah, LGB, bisexuals, hardest to trust. And then the T, that shit is new to me. That shit is new. Even being in Atlanta, you knew that they were there, but you didn't know, like you just didn't know. And so otherwise, that community and their civil rights cases and having their cases heard at the highest levels, I'll tell you like this, from my even projection piece, the Supreme Court Justice, Brother George Macon, is more conservative. There's probably only one or two people who will come anywhere near close to siding on the side of the LGBT. And that was the one who was appointed under President Obama, who is that Sotomayor. But the rest of them are no. The answer is still no. So it's a symbolic gesture or victory. The ramifications are deep, though, because even the no, get this, Brother George, means that no, you cannot be to tell somebody. It's one thing to say, I don't think I discriminated against you. It's another thing to say, you know what? I do have my own personal biases. And for those reasons, you know, the B's, the bi is a little bit harder for me to trust. So I can own that on a personal level. But to tell them outright that you can't be discriminated upon as if you're not a human being is the next level of analysis. No, you don't exist. You are unrecognizable. Says you can't be afforded protection because as a group, you are an illusionary group. It's like almost like how Black people are trying to tell us white supremacists don't exist. They say, well, there might be white supremacists themselves on an individual level, but white supremacy doesn't exist as a collective. And it's almost it's what? There are actual collective groups, white supremacy and white supremacist terrorist groups and structured organizations with treasurers and bylaws and all type of shit, marketing and budgets. And they have gathering places and meeting spaces. They have political influence. They got day jobs. But as a group, they are a part of the group, just like LGBT is a part of a group. Police is a collective, a group that has now been afforded a protected class status. So this case on that other end of the spectrum is to establish whether or not their group has a legitimate identity to be protected in America anyway. That they are a group. And that as a group, they should be protected. Veterans. That it wasn't a thing. Being a veteran just meant that you served during a time of war and that you are no longer in active duty. But now it is a protected class group. It is a protected group that says do not hire somebody just because you think veterans who served after 9/11 might be suffering from PTSD. And you are afraid that if you hired somebody who has PTSD or suffers from PTSD, they won't be a good cultural fit. When really your fear of people with PTSD is you getting your ass whooped in a disagreement. But for you, you are protected as an institution from not hiring veterans as long as, and this is what I'm trying to tell you, and I'm gonna shut it down after this. Thanks, Brother Kenny. As long as the burden is on that veteran to prove that you discriminated against them as a veteran because they're a veteran. People with disabilities, as long as the onus is on the people with disabilities like PTSD, I got to go about it by proving that this white person didn't give me a promotion because of my PTSD. What examples would you like to see, and how the hell am I supposed to get those examples? You are asking me literally to go back to the same person who discriminated against me and ask them to discriminate, not to discriminate, but to incriminate against themselves. And that's why the Supreme Court justice case is serious and important, Brother George Macon, because it is the most unrealistic expectation. The outcome, even at the end of this, is that by the end of this Supreme Court justice ruling, it will be the onus of the victim, whether dead or alive, but most likely dead or incarcerated, to prove that they were a victim. I'll say it again. The onus will be on the victim, whether dead or alive, to prove that they were a victim. And that's just because of this ass backwards way that these people think. When you want to be in positions of power, you will out-empower. You will put power before everything, and the power that they have right now is going to at some point work again. It doesn't have a consistency or a love-based platform in it that allows it to operate with consistency. And so in this case, I say keep watch. It's too late to oppose it. It's too late to do anything against it. Right now, it is a part of what you are and wherever group you identify with, and there's nothing you can do about it. The same way that they can tell them, look, you are not a group, is the same way that they can tell black folks, look, this whole discrimination shit is played. This whole, oh, this guy is racist. This whole, but that's unfair. Get over it. And that's where we're going. The actual ability to even say that this is unfair and to bring that to court is now going to be on you to, if you think it's unfair, prove it. And the only way that you can prove it is to go to this very people who made it unfair and ask them to incriminate themselves in the court of law. That is $1 million lawsuits, class action lawsuits like Comcast, large and small. The onus is on you to prove. Actually, your onus is on you to convince them to incriminate themselves. 99.9 times out of 100, they just won't do it. Tune in. Next time, we can talk about next steps and what does that actually mean for the ramifications of the African-American liberation movements, Pan-Africanism, Black power, or Black first ideology. What does that do to you? Now that no matter what you do, guilty by association, probable cause, suspicion, I suspect that this nigga did something, and you can be pulled over, stop and frisk. I suspect that this nigga done did something. Media, black media, this nigga look like a thug. What the fuck does that mean? Look like policing. He looks like a gang member. and all the media and the coonery of the African American and the African American, what does that mean to the movement that the Supreme Court justice comes down and then says, you know what, you are no longer a protected class? What does that mean? When the Supreme Court justice says, you know what, racism is, when the Supreme Court justice determines that racism is no longer a defense in a court of law. You as the plaintiff can no longer really use racism because it has effectively been stripped of its power. You have to prove racism, which is an ideology. And even a recording about ideology, grab them by the pussy, even something like that is not going to be used in the court. And even if it's used, it doesn't prove an ideology, and it doesn't prove that they use that ideology against you specifically. So they can have a track record, a Goldwater record. You can have a Goldwater record of discrimination. You can have an Alabama governor record of discrimination. You can have a hooded Klans member record, or your record could be impeccable. The only time we ever known that you had racism in you is when we saw you on Twitter posting, or when we saw you down in Charlottesville with a tiki torch. That's the only time we saw their record of racism. But yet, because of that, even bringing in their record and saying, look, it's establishing a precedent or an opinion on the ideology that was used against me, the courts still say, but the onus is not to prove that they are a piece of shit. The onus is not to prove that they have some very borderline offensive and rude and punk ass, bitch ass thoughts about certain social issues. It's not to prove that they are absolutely willing to become violent against you. When you bring it to court, your point is to prove that they did, in fact, do it against you because of your race. I'll give it to you again. This person right here, I'll pick one. That one, because of the size of the picture. I hope that ain't Thaddeus Stevens, because he was actually on the right side of this conversation, or our side. Let me see if I can blow that up a little bit. See what that does. But damn, that didn't blow up. That did the opposite. It got smaller. African American Registry. That's nice. It's not just about having a website. Oh yeah, that was when they was going in. Like, if you haven't read the bill, I watched Tone Talks as well. Of course, I've read the bill numerous times, because this is the era that I actually speak to. Because at the same time in the 1860s, remember, they had the Landstead, or the Homestead Act of 1862 that had just gotten underway. So one of the major contracts that was important was the establishing of land and land ownership of those freed men, those African Americans or people of African descent, American descendants of slavery. And as they were moving or trying to leverage this new government bill of a Homestead Act, which had big tracts of land available, they started running into this idea that, look, you're black, you have a contract. I see that you want to buy this land outright, or that you want to be a tenant farmer or a sharecropper until you can buy this land. I'm willing, what we're going to need to do is get you your ability to sign this contract here. So if the white man initiated a contract, then good. But if the black man tried to initiate a contract with those white folks or with the government, then it didn't have to be recognized until the Civil Rights Bill came out and said, look, we have to recognize their ability to enter into a contract. That was one of the first things done. And that would have allowed for African Americans or Africans in America to have the land that they needed to start their own farms and subsistence farming and provide for their families, and to establish some of those communities like the Tulsa, Oklahomas, or the Wilmington, North Carolinas. That being the case, though, they needed the precedent. They needed the language actually written out. And so even getting those contracts done, then what happened? The tenant farming and the sharecropping started to come in as a system. And white people was like, well, there is no contract that I have to appreciate or that I am beholden to with an African American. So you saw them fight back again and start to take away even from those gains as more racist white folks. So the thing is, when black folks said, look, man, I want to bring this white guy, he's racist, he stole my land, he tried to rape my wife, and if we hadn't evacuated, we would have been dead. I want to bring him up on charges of attempted murder, property theft, property damage, and all of that. He was laughed out of the courtroom. That is 2019 and 2020 business, because right now you are still not in a position to bring white people to that thing and say, look, my business was going to be a thriving and successful business had it not been for this. And then you're able to go to the exact laws and the statutes, the rezoning, the districting, the interest rates, and all of the everything else that plays out to work disproportionately in your favor, and say, look, it was the redlining, it was all of these issues or whatever bills, whatever people, however it is that you approach it, and say, these are the actual defendants that we need to have a day in court with. The Bank of Americas, right? State and local governance, right? Their day in court is not able to be had yet because they're still operating under this auspices that black men have no right. They are not, no, that white men have, well, I don't know how to say it. They are not beholden to any law that would tell them that they are subject to black man's rule or authority. And that was brought out even in this case, and in the media that happened afterwards. But yeah, man, chock full of a hell of a lot of facts. I start here because my life and my future and the future of my children is inextricably bound and tied to this civil rights bill. My ability to work. I'm sorry, I live in a capitalist nation. And the biggest gain from civil rights was employment law. And every time they fight back against employment law, we stand to lose. I don't care if it's for the discrimination against hair, which was a victory, but how do you enforce it, which is a failure? What is enforced in there? When a black woman feels or a black man feels like they're being discriminated against based on hair, how do you prove said discrimination if your Supreme Court justice is putting the onus of proof? It's like they're extended the innocence, the whatever you call that shit. Corporations, big businesses are extended innocence. And now the burden of proof is upon the people. But again, Marxist, communist type of ideologies that go up against it, socialist type of ideologies that go up against it, that says, look, man, you're not going to get the full benefits of your capitalist system as long as discrimination exists. Here are just the basic areas to where discrimination is still existing. Do something about them and calling them to account. The LGBTQ community, Brother George Macon, is trying to call them to account. It's a double-edged sword, a catch-22, which I'll talk about on the next show as well. But peace and thanks everybody for joining us. It's been a blast. Let me see if I can stop sharing right now. And when I stop sharing, what does that do to my screen? Oh, wait. Let's try it. Am I able to add? Oh, shit. I'm stepping my YouTube as social media content development up. I think I have a brother here who I know him to be an elder, but that is through the grapevine. Somebody who is a mod, somebody who is a key contributor in many of the spaces on here on YouTube that I frequent, like the O'Shea Duke, the Brother Pill channel, and all that. Got my big brother, my elder, O'Shea Linux, that was willing to come on up. Brother O'Shea Linux, please unmute yourself and say hello, man.
What's going on, Brother Moses?
What's going on, my elder? What up, OG? Triple OG, triple OG. What with all that?
Nah, see that. Look, that triple OG and all that. That come from O'Shea Leonard. That come from O'Shea Duke Jackson.
Yeah, it does.
He called me an ancestor elder. It's only because of the way I actually sound, but I hope it's because some of the information and some of the ideas and some of the words and so forth that I do use. Also grants me that, hopefully grants me that that title also. Otherwise, it'll just be wrongly misused on the wrong person. So with all that being said, I jumped up here because look, I see you stepping into your little groove and everything. So I want to give you just a little bit of support and all that. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir, and I appreciate it.
You be spending a whole bunch of these little facts and knowledges and stuff, and in a way that I actually understand it. Because look, coming from the South, listen to them Southern preachers. Boy, you got that Southern preacher thing about you, and be off the chain. But I have a whole bunch of ideas and stuff about a lot of stuff going on, especially with the LGBT thing that be going on.
Speak on it, if you will.
Now, here's the thing about it. Now, what I'm finna say gonna sound real crazy, but this is how I see it from a personal and from a spiritual standpoint. But on a personal standpoint, business-wise, look, I have no issue really with discrimination. I really don't. When it comes down to private businesses, I really don't have that great of an issue with it, because it's like this with me. If you don't want me at your business, then tell me so. I'm fine. I'm cool with that. I'll go somewhere else, and eventually you may have to deal with me down the road. Because look, if you tell me you don't want me there, then that's gonna force me to have to come up with ways to improve myself, my mental thinking, and my personal skills and my social skills to be able to convince other people or to persuade other people that look, I am worth the business and what I'm trying to put out to you. I'm worth it. And that means I have to work a whole lot harder. So once I actually get in a position where I can also give jobs to other people, then guess what? Then it will be left up to me to also accept certain things that other people would not have accepted. Because me personally, I would not, and look, me being a photographer, there have been many times where I have had to turn down people of homosexual. I don't do homosexual stuff. I'm not finna up and take a woman out of woman in a homosexual nature, and I'm not gonna take a man in a homosexual nature. I'm not finna do homosexual weddings. I've had to I've turned at least one down. But thank God, thing about it was my name is not so big to the point where I caught the wrong attention and they decide they want to fight me on it. Because the moment you turn down in business and you turn down somebody of homosexuality and stuff like that, they can make your life a living hell. Because they made that guy that made cake, they made his life a living hell for a while. I thank God that he was able to win over that, because when you look at situations, and I know I'm being kind of long-winded, I hope I'm not rambling too much, but when you look at a situation where if you go into a place where you know people do not partake in the same type of stuff that you do, and you sit up and you pass by a whole lot of other businesses that they are welcoming you, that says more so that you're not trying to get equal rights. That says more so that you are trying to what is the word I'm looking for? You're trying to make other people that you know don't like what you're doing submit to you and partake in what you are doing, regardless of whether they like it or not. That's one of my biggest deals when it comes down to a lot of these things. But now on a federal level, there should be no discrimination. There should be no. Now that I think there should be rules and guidelines and regulations, because you always want to get the best of the best. But as far as saying, look, you are no homosexual, so we can't hire you. No, that's wrong. And I don't believe that people should do bodily harm to people because of the lifestyle that they chose to live. I don't believe in that either. To me, That's wrong. That's making you judge, jury, and executioner. But I not. But no, I do know up under the Old Testament, up under the rule. Look, yeah, under God's law. Oh yeah, punishment was swift and it was quick. But here's the thing: even under that, you actually had to catch people actually in the act. It wasn't no hearsay. You actually had to catch them in the act. So that stopped a whole lot of this false accusatory stuff. Even under that, if you went and you brought somebody to a court, if you said something against somebody and you could not prove it, then the punishment was on you. That stopped a whole lot of this false accusatory stuff. Without Moses, I'm not going to go any further with that. But I just look. I appreciate you having me up here, and I'm gonna be dipping in and out on you as you progress through this thing, because I can see. Look, I can see a bright future for you. I can see a bright future in this thing for you, man.
Thank you, Doc, man. Thanks for joining and thanks for adding what you said, man. The South, I can only say I got to appreciate every time I get the opportunity to have that conversation. My dad, my mother were born and raised in the South, and then they took us all to California. So my dad being a military man. So I didn't get to experience living in the South until I was a grown person. And by that time, it was already too late to really learn and really understand and appreciate that Southern hospitality. I'm raised in California, so it was always cool. The fact that they didn't have legal marijuana just made it bad for me, my whole experience as a grown person. So now I'm back on the West Coast. But yeah, I can definitely say thank you for that. Thanks for your vote of support coming on up, making sure that the links work out good. Little Miss Chocolate was like, you know what? I'm cool, but I will help you test it. But O'Shea, man, I appreciate that, man. Are you going over to the Rumble a little bit later? I think it should be a good one today, right?
Man, I'm gonna be peeping in. I don't know if I'm gonna go up on that because see, to me that the big Rumble thing is not necessarily my thing. I like more so when you like doing the business type stuff where you have you up there. I like that I like that a little bit more because to me I'm able to throw out some of the little small tidbits of stuff that I know that does work and anybody and just about anybody, if not anybody, can get into without having to have a whole lot of money and stuff like that. Because see, sometimes here's the thing: people a lot of times they miss out on a lot of opportunity because they'll look. I like how Dr. Miles Monroe said it. They have their heads in the cloud. They got their heads in the cloud, but they keep forgetting their feet are on the ground. So sometimes, look, you can't have your head so far up to where you forget and you miss the opportunities that are right here on the ground, right where you are.
That's right. My apologies. Looks like my technology had kicked me for a second, but I still heard it in the headphones. I just couldn't see it on my screen. All right. It looks like I got looks like Taz GOAT exclusives of the B1 network will be starting a live stream. I would always say from here, salute. Feel free to go join on that network. I will be in the chat I am a moderator on that panel. I mean, on that channel. So I will be headed over there right now. Again, thanks for everybody. As my disclaimer, gang notification, gang the word 9 walking today, some thumbs up. If you didn't hit the thumbs up button, now is still a good time to do so, and I would appreciate that. What that thumbs up button does is Google Analytics content like this that gets out there and starts to pick up a little bit of traction. They look behind the scenes and see, well, how many videos are you doing? Who's watching your videos? Did they hit the thumbs up button on the video? Did they press the thumbs down? Now that you're starting to develop that, how much time did they watch? Did they watch for 4 or 5 minutes, 5 minutes? Did they space it out? Did they watch for the whole stream? So they're using all of that. The analytics for the thumbs up, they use that to determine where they'll send your notification, when they'll send your notification, and how often they'll send that notification. So there may be other people who could benefit as well, who could benefit from the information or just enjoy a good live stream on a good Sunday morning that may not get the notification without us doing our due diligence of hitting that thumbs up button. Also there is the ability to share the content. Now, this is a long stream. I wouldn't recommend sharing this one, probably just the first 5 minutes, maybe not even that. But what I'm going to do is shut this down. There are certain sectors as we move into this space that we can find, like Brother O'Shea said, with business. If that's the type of content that you would like, you do have my email available to you and accessible to you. I am not just a social media content creator. I do go to work every day. So give me a little bit of time on the emails and I will respond. But other than that, if there is content or collaborations that you would like to see, other YouTube content creators that you know deliver good message or similar message, hell, even some of those folks who have the opposite message, feel free to shoot that information via email. I'm also available via Instagram. So looking forward to connecting, engaging. Lots of information. There's so much to continue to unpack. So many key learnings. Today's major lesson was it's too late to hate the LGBTQ for having their cases at this or heard at the Supreme Court justice. Their case is inextricably bound with ours. So at this point, it's better just to become an ally, if not a personal ally. Not saying that you need to have friends that you communicate with and do all of that. You might not be there yet on your human experience and how you interact with people. But from a political and a class sense, it's too late to oppose this bill. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It is the catch-22. Should they be recognized as a group? That's not for your individual perspective. That is now for the Supreme Court justice to determine. And it is linked to the freedom that we all enjoy. Peace and Black Power, Black First. I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'll be in the chat over at Taz Go, exclusive of the B1 Networks. Thanks for watching.